Hello. Labrīt.
Good morning, everyone. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, both domestic and also our guests from Norway. My name is Jānis Asaris. I represent the State Inspection for Heritage Protection, head of the Policy Department. And today, my task is to moderate and also to watch closely so that our speakers do not exceed the time, so that we can stick to our schedule. So, first of all, I would like to welcome you all in this small, cozy room. It is an honor for me to open today's seminar, which is dedicated to the restoration process and sustainable use of historic buildings. And this seminar is organized in cooperation between the State Inspection for Heritage Protection as well as the Norwegian Directorate for Heritage Protection. And we're happy to also have attracted sponsors and supporters, and I truly hope that this seminar is interesting and fruitful for all of us. Of course, it is a pity that some of the participants unfortunately could not participate and come to today's event. Nevertheless, our seminar is also broadcast live on internet, so more people are able to follow us. And now for the opening address, I will now give floor to the host, namely Director of the Latvian Ethnographic Open Air Museum, Ilze Millersone. Dear guests, dear colleagues, dear cooperation partners, it is a great honor and joy for me to greet you all in the Open Air Museum as we open this conference dedicated to the restoration process and sustainable use of historic buildings, which is a great opportunity for exchanging our experiences. And I would like to thank the Inspection for Heritage Protection, as well as Ministry of Culture, as well as the Norwegian Directorate for Natural and Cultural Heritage for organizing this event. And we, the museum, are happy to host this event. The restoration of wooden buildings is something that we are dealing with on a daily basis. And also among our exhibits, we have more than 100 ancient wooden buildings that require a lot of work from our restoration experts as well as leading experts in this area. And in this sophisticated process, we have already achieved a lot. We have celebrated a lot of small victories. Of course, we also have made certain mistakes. Sometimes we come across difficult questions. We are seeking for answers. And not always we are able to find the right answers. And this is one of the great opportunities that we have to find new answers, to discuss problematic issues. Therefore, I wish you all a very productive conference. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Millersone. And now for an opening address, I will now give floor to a representative from the Ministry of Culture, from the Department of EU Funds, namely Zanda Saulīte. Good morning, dear participants. It is a great pleasure for me to see so many of you gathered in this room, which shows that the interest is very high in this area, and we are happy to attract the EEA grant, which has been very valuable for our cause. And the Ministry of Culture has been also one of the participants in this program, and we have done a lot to actually, starting from 2012, and currently we are running into the finalizing phase of the program. Many projects have been concluded, and more to be concluded until the end of this year. And under this program, altogether 11.7 million have been allocated, and 10 million have been allocated specifically for restoration of historic heritage. And this support has been distributed among different programs and also different formats of exchanges and mobility projects. And we have already see some tangible outcomes, such as, for example, the strong focus on high-quality restoration works, on pilot projects, so to say, to create role models, which also has helped a lot to exchange experiences and to develop competencies. And this has allowed both the Latvian experts and Norwegian experts to learn. And another success story is actually the very fact that we have covered quite broad spectrum of our work. We have attracted a lot of experts. We have worked closely with municipal and state institutions. And we have also involved a lot of university students and also school children in many projects. And since we are approaching the finalizing stages of the program, we can also talk about broader scale benefits. For example, actually raising the public awareness about how valuable our cultural heritage is in order to strengthen people's identities, and also learning how to interpret this content. And as we restore our heritage, we are not talking about actual technical work, but also new approaches to learning how to sustainably use this valuable resource that we have inherited from previous generations. And since this project also is aimed at creating networks and exchanges, I would like to thank very much our cooperation partners that have worked very closely with our ministry, and namely our Norwegian colleagues, the Cultural Heritage Directorate, as well as the Latvian Inspection for Heritage Protection, and also the actual beneficiaries or implementers of the project. And we could see that there is an increasing interest in actually to have this opportunity to participate. And the restoration and preservation activities will also be supported in the next planning periods. And therefore, I wish you all a very inspiring and productive event today. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Saulīte, for your opening address. And now I will give floor to the head of the State Inspection for Heritage Protection of Latvia, Juris Dambis, who will probably focus on what is the actual idea behind this seminar and what we'll be doing throughout today. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to stand in front of you in this very inspiring environment. And I'm also very happy to see that this room is crowded with people who are interested in this topic. And if you ask why do we organize this event, you already heard from the previous speakers that we have had quite successful cooperation with our Norwegian colleagues under various projects. And we have had a lot of good examples of learning, of practical activities of restoration. And of course, we are dealing with various problems and challenges in our daily work. And on a regular basis, we can feel that we need to improve our competences to become even better specialists and experts, especially as to the practical aspects rather than administrative or bureaucratic aspects. And of course, the cultural heritage has the mission of preserving the heritage as a very important factor of the quality of life of humans, and to have these material items of cultural heritage and to raise awareness about these values. And our aim is to develop the knowledge and understanding of restoration processes, as well as to put a strong focus on authenticity, and also to get close cooperation with the Open Air Museum. We aim to create the Restoration Competence Center and also the depository of cultural and historic heritage, on which we will focus tomorrow, which means that this is not just a separate seminar. We will follow up afterwards as well. And the reasons for all this is actually the shortage of competent specialists when it comes to restoration process, and also the number of various pieces of heritage to be restored is constantly increasing. And therefore, it is our responsibility to ensure appropriate quality. And also, this is a great opportunity for us to build on the best practices of the Latvian inspectorate, as well as our Norwegian counterparts, because the Norwegian directorate has been a very close partners throughout years already. And during all this time, we have been quite happy to have such great partners. And of course, this means that we are talking about various cultural and historic values that have to be preserved, which require a responsible approach. And this is about setting guidelines on how to deal with these issues. This is also about how the restoration processes should be organized on site. This is also about using the appropriate materials and appropriate techniques. This is also about applying the knowledge and experience. And also, this is about the success stories, about best practices that we will share throughout today's seminar. And this is also about the overall atmosphere that is created by separate items of cultural and historic heritage. And the preservation of cultural and historic monuments is all about following certain guidelines, which we try to define, we try to revise and review, and about which we will be talking about these days. And of course, regular maintenance is one of the cornerstones of preservation. And we all know that hasty actions can only lead to losses and damages. And so far, we have tried to emphasize the fact that the European Economic Area projects should facilitate the implementation of best practices and best philosophies, and the conservation and restoration works should always be well thought through, and they have to be managed by appropriately qualified professionals. And these managing models should be applied already in early stages rather than only at the final stages. And likewise, it is very important to talk about the research activities and as well as documentation of all the processes and involvement and attracting of appropriately qualified specialists. And in each restoration project, we have to clearly define to what extent we will ensure preservation of authentic materials and substance, and what materials will be used to also ensure the appropriate functionability or functioning of these facilities. And also, we have to apply appropriate techniques as well as manual work, and also the efficient use of all the materials, which include the original materials. And also in the documentation on conservation, we have to define quality indicators, which are of great importance whenever we organize tenders. Also, within the scope of different projects, we have to think about exchange of experience, learning processes. We have to disseminate the best practices. And when we talk about our good cooperation with our Norwegian colleagues, I must emphasize that so far we have had very great experience, especially in terms of ensuring high quality. And we have been very blessed for all the opportunities that we have had in terms of learning from our colleagues and in terms of exchanging our experiences, because very many training seminars have been held so far. Also, we have to have a very strong focus on providing guidelines regarding the maintenance after the restoration works are completed. We cannot simply finalize the restoration works and that's it. Otherwise, in some 10 or 15 years, we will have to actually start from scratch. And this Latvian open-air museum is a great place for developing competencies. And here you can see the blacksmith house, where we have already organized various seminars and workshops for young specialists. And in this blacksmith shop, we are trying to develop our competences. We have had many training sessions and apprenticeships, not only at the domestic level, but also internationally. We have also identified Bonaventure Manor, this building that currently is not used in any way, but in close cooperation with the museum, we are planning to create a competence center in this building in which we could organize various training events in the future. And of course, at this place, we could also assemble various parts of our cultural and historic heritage. And what concerns the inspection, which I represent, and our future plans, we are willing to adopt our agenda, our future plans, towards the technical work, also the consulting. In other words, we would like to put more emphasis on practical work instead of administrative or bureaucratic. In other words, we would like to focus on actual heritage rather than administrative issues. And in the conclusion, let me once again emphasize that the preservation of cultural heritage is not just about the past. It is rather all about the future and the future quality of life of our people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dambis. And now, before we move on to the good examples of good practice, a bit of practical information. You can all see that we have simultaneous translation available. And before I give the floor to our Norwegian colleagues, I remind you that the Latvian interpretation is available on channel 2. I would also like to especially have the people that were latecomers pay attention to this information. So be aware that you have interpretation, and you will be also able to hear the interpretation outside of the hall and perhaps even on the terrace. So now it is my pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Sjur Mehlum from the Norwegian Heritage Protection Directorate, and he will tell us about the Norwegian experience and involvement and importance of cooperation and knowledge transfer.
Well, I will say thank you for inviting me here. I've heard about all the projects here in this country and the other Baltic countries, and I've always liked to go there. I've heard about my colleagues going there, and I will say, oh, one day, hopefully, will be my turn. But so now finally I'm here. So I have been working at the Directorate for Cultural Heritage for almost 20 years. Before that, I was working as I have a career as a carpenter before I started as at the university. So then I will give you some examples from it's a Stave Church program. It was a program that was ended now in December last year, and the aim of this project was to restore all the 28 Stave churches in Norway. I will not tell you so much about the Stave churches as buildings, but I will concentrate on how we had the cooperation with the craftsmen, because the craftsmen here was a really important part of the whole project. Without these skilled carpenters, this program would be impossible to do. So this is Urnes Stave Church. This is the one on the World Heritage List. This is a drawing of a Stave Church, and just to give you a short introduction to why it's called a Stave Church, it's because you have this is the staves, and this on the sill. If you don't have this construction here, you don't have the Stave Church. So it's just to say it a very simple way. And in Norway, we had around maybe 1,500 of these churches during the in the Middle Age, and today we just have 28 of them, and they are the Norwegian contribution to the world architecture. You don't find Stave churches outside Norway. So then I will give you some examples from this project, and to tell how we to try to show you how we were working close with the carpenters. And here it's also some stonework, but mostly this is carpenters that we'll be working with. This is maybe the most famous one. This is called Borgundstave Church. It's located at the west coast of Norway, in a valley called Lærdal. And this building, as it is, it's from the around 1180. And the problem here, and to tell you then, to start then with the carpenter's role here. It's the carpenters that do the first investigation of the church. They are doing you can say that they are looking for rotten parts. They are writing down the reports, what should be done, and they write down damages, the causes of the damages, and also they give how the solutions of how to treat the rotten parts or the damages. So then here, but then working with a church like this church here with the problem here was the shingle roof. And when you're working with this, and this roof here, it's the most famous stave church roof in Norway. This is the so-called the icon. This is the way a stave church roof should look. And on this church, it's been changing shingles several times through since it was first built in 1180, but they have never changed shingles on the whole church. So you have here shingles from different generation. Up here, we think that you have one original one from 1180, but the rest of the church they have changed shingles several times. And then our project was then it was necessary to repair the roof, but then we were discussing first at our office, is it possible to change just the rotten shingles? And then because we wanted, if you change all the shingles here, you will get a quite other impression of the church when it's finished. Because if you see here, so then the first summer they were trying to do, we did some test felts, the carpenters did some test felts. Is it possible just to change the rotten parts? And you can see here that you have here different, this one is older than this one, and this is the new ones. And here it was important for us to discuss this and to try, as a carpenter, to try to just choose to change the rotten ones, because if it was necessary the first season to do some test felts, and that's what they did. And here, this is before you can start the work in the church, they have to produce the shingles, and the shingles were produced in the traditional way, with an axe and just an axe. So it's on the others, you can also produce them by a saw, but here we wanted to use the traditional materials and also the traditional techniques. So then this was the first part of it. And then this is a test. Part, test felt on the church. And when we did this, we did this test felt. You can say that we used this test felt as to find the right level. So then, in the beginning, I was traveling there several times to have discussions with the carpenter. Is this possible to do? And then they did. Yeah, it's possible to do. And then we had a lot of discussions on the site, and because it's not possible to give the carpenters here a sort of a recipe. Because you have to be there to see this shingle is rotten. You have to change it. It's impossible to write all these things down. So in working in this way, we will. Agreed about the level. And then the next season the project raised a scaffolding that covered the whole church. And then this this scaffolding is really expensive, and then it's important that when you do things like this, then you have to all these kind of philosophical discussion about authenticity and things like that. You have to be finished with this kind of discussion when you do like this, because then it's a building site. Then you have to, in the way, to finish the project. So then, here you can see on the scaffolding one of the craftsmen, and every time they were discussing things, they could call to me, or in most cases I said to them, go down and have a look at these test felts that we did. How did you do it there? So they had, in the way, they can go to the lower part of the church to see how they did it last summer. And then it was a very convenient way to do it, that they can, because for our office we couldn't go there to discuss every shingles. So then we would go there, then we have to live there and to stay there with them. So this was a really good way to do it, to discuss and have the discussions about authenticity and the traditional techniques and the traditional materials. We had that the first season, and the next summer season, they did the whole work. Here we can see how they work, and I can just show you from the last picture. You can see here that you have a lane out here. This inner lane is for the carpenter, and the outer lane here it's for the tourists. So the tourists were here invited up on the scaffolding, and it was a big success for the owner of the church, because they didn't have the possibility to show the exterior of the church, but they can invite the tourist up on the scaffolding. And then I will show you the next project, and you can see here's the church here, and this is the belfry, also from the medieval time. This is the only belfry that we have in Norway that's from the medieval time. And I can show you some old picture of it. This was taken in the 1930s, and you can see here that today it's paneled, and that's one important part of this Stave Church program, that it was not a project where we restored to a former state or things like that. We repair the building as it is today. So this is the way it looks in the 1930s, and this is a repair work from the 1950s. You can see here the rotten stave here, or column, is filled with concrete. It was a common way to do it in Norway in the 1950s. And here we had this sketch here. He shows the yellow parts here. It's the rotten parts. And so then the whole belfry was dismantled and brought to the carpenter's workshop. And here you can see the conditions. And then this work was, first we had to dismantle the whole belfry, and again you can see here that the carpenters with the traditional material, of course, that's wood, but also then they use the axe. They use the same kind of. They try to use the same kind of axes that make the same marks on the original parts of the church, of the belfry. And here also, this is one of the carpenters. They also then have the job with a serial survey of this. All the parts of this of the dismantled belfry was measured and drawn. And it was also then the carpenters that did this work. And it was very convenient because they have all the parts in the workshop, and they were doing the work there. So it was not necessary to bring in it's nothing wrong about architects or engineers, but it wasn't necessary in this case. It was carpenters that did this work. Here you can see, and then you will have discussions like here. You can see here, you have to change some rotten part, and we will always have discussion. How much should be changed? Is it possible to do the repair work, or do you have to change the whole beam? But you always will have discussions on this kind of, when you're working with old materials, you will always have a discussion of this. And I will say that here that's not one reason that it's not like this, that one solution is really wrong and the other one is it's the best way. It will always be, you have to make some change, you have to take some decisions, and you have to stand for them. But to say it simple, that we try to change as little as possible, and it's as possible. And in this case, this is as little as possible, and we always use, the carpenters then use the traditional materials and the traditional tools. And I think one very important reason for using the traditional materials and the traditional tools, that when you're working with a building that is built in the 1180 and it's in so good condition, you can say in good condition concerning that it's almost 800 years old, you should have had really good reason to choose something else than traditional materials and traditional techniques. Because if you try as hard as you can to do it is in the same way as originally built, then I will say that it is a good chance it will last for another 800 years. Don't think that when you're working with old buildings, you should not do any experiment with modern materials. And here, when it's then the repair work was finished, then it was again raised at the buildings at the site, and here then you have. This was a connection that the carpenters invented for this special project, because this is not a traditional way to do it. The traditional way, I will think, was to change the whole thing. But here again, it was important to save as much as possible. And then in this case you get a solution like this. And here, this is before it was the panel was back on the building, and here you can see that it's you can see it's a lot of new parts here, and you can see up here. This is in Norway it's a common way to do it, and then finally the whole belfry got a new paneling on all the walls, and this is the reason for this, that you in one way you can have left it like this and it would be like it was in the 1930s, but then it was one of the main principles in the Stave Church program, that we just repair the church as it is. It's because when you start, it will be a completely different project, which we should also have discussed. Should it do to take some buildings back to a former state, and it will be difficult to find the right period. And so I think it was a good solution to have this principle that repair the church as it is. And then I will give you another example. This is Nore Stave Church. Just to show you that here is Nore. This is Nore Stave Church, how it looks today. But if here, this is the original Stave Church. Here, this is, and then this here, this is later additions. So then, if you should have restored this building, you have to remove a lot of its history. But the problem here was this part here, and it was also rotten parts here, and I will show you how we did it. This is a traditional log construction with the rotten parts here. And then it was they had to dismantle this part of the building, and then they use in a way it's the traditional materials and the traditional tools. And here you can see that they have had to change these 3 lower logs, and then again we will always have discussions like this. Or maybe it will be in this case they choose to do it like this, but you could also have maybe made the cut here, or so it will always be discussions like this. How much should be saved, and it's one thing. It's that you can wish things at our office. We can wish that we have to change. You have to save as much as possible, but it also, on the other hand, you have this is a load-bearing system. So the structures you have to do the repair work. So you have to save as much as possible, but the building should also be a structural the structural should be sound and in good condition. So that's sometimes you have to change more than you wanted, but you have to think of also that this building should be in use and things like that. So then here when it's finished. And then here, up here, it was serious problems with moisture and rotten parts, and then you can see here they have changed parts of it. And here, see, they dismantle the thing and just change the rotten parts. And again, and will be, as I said before, you can see here is the traditional tools with and the traditional materials. And in one way, it's simple to say it, but on the other hand, you have to use a lot of time to find the right materials. Even in Norway, it's covered with forest. It's hard to find the best and good quality pine, and also we have a lot of skilled craftsmen in Norway, but it's important to give also younger carpenters the chance to work with the buildings like this. So the man here, he's one that are really pleased to work with younger craftsmen to learn. So it's important that the skill how to do it also go through to the next generation. And here it's then, and then to in a way to sum up the whole stave church program and how we were working with it. That was this thing with the emphasis on and the importance of handcraft and material quality. That is something that's quite new in Norway. It's just since the 1990, beginning of the 1990s, that we've been working like this in Norway. If you go to our archives to see how the stave churches were in a way treated before, it's just a letter. It's just a letter to some craftsmen. Do it the best way you can, or it's nothing about material. So it's nothing about the quality of the materials, or it's nothing about about tools and techniques, nothing. So this is something that, this is for the last 25, 26 years, this is the way we have been, this is to say it's a new way to work in Norway, at least 25 years, and I think it's a very good way when you're working with old buildings to have a very close and cooperation with the craftsmen that actually will have to do the work. Thank you.
Paldies Mehlum kungam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mehlum, for your presentation. Of course, we all might have questions. Let us leave them for the discussion part at the end of the seminar. So let us move on. Of course, in Latvia, we practically don't have any wooden buildings that have survived since 12th or 13th century. Nevertheless, of course, we also try to apply, whenever possible, similar principles to those described in this presentation, which includes the traditional materials as well as tools. And this is where I will now switch to the next speaker, namely Pēteris Blūms, who will talk about a case study of a Ludza synagogue from research to restoration. Dear colleagues, my name is Pēteris Blūms. I'm an architect, and my first workplace connected to restoration and preservation of historic buildings was actually an exhibit at the Open Air Museum. And I started as a plumber back at 1969, so it was a long time ago. And altogether, I have been involved in restoration works actually forever. It seems like forever. And in my presentation, I will talk about a specific project which has been completed quite recently. It is a synagogue located in Ludza, in the eastern part of Latvia. And this synagogue is one of two remaining wooden synagogues in Latvia. In a way, it was a unique project. And actually, it's one of the very few wooden synagogues in Europe, and actually one of the oldest in northern and eastern Europe. So the actual project was implemented quite hastily. It was in 2013 when it was listed, and on the same year it was actually transferred to the ownership of municipality. And also we started the research. We studied the building. And actually, this was the first historic building that was restored in Ludza municipality. And I would say that, generally speaking, it has been the trend only for last 7-8 years. So in Ludza municipality, this was something new, and they didn't have any specialists or experience in this area. So what concerns the research and study part, as well as design part, it all was done by the bureau which I represent. And I, all together with 3 architects, undertook this project. And in a way, I acted as a mentor as the project leader and also the director of our bureau. And of course, also the municipality and all the support they provided was very important in this project. And through negotiations, quite lengthy negotiations, the municipality actually, we have had to convince them that it is actually possible to preserve and restore these wooden buildings and how the local communities would benefit from it. Some of them are located very close to the border with Russia. And in a way, it was not a standard situation in Latvia, because quite many people, in a way, neglect the architecture of Latgale region near the border with Russia, because they say, oh, you know, somehow it doesn't go together with Latvian mentality. It has too much of an influence from Russian architecture. However, lately, the understanding has improved about the value of these differences between Latvian regions, and that we actually have to preserve these differences and show the diversity of wooden architecture across Latvian regions. And that the Latgale region heritage actually has its own value, and we cannot regard it as simply something that they have borrowed from Russia. This is actually a very unique mix of Russian influences as well as the traditional Latvian school. In a way, it's a melting pot of local scale. Of course, I could talk for hours about this particular project, but let me try to stick to the time allocated to me. And to give you a background, Ludza was had one of the largest Jewish communities in Latvia, and they also gave a lot of contribution in establishing the State of Israel in mid-20th century. And up to 60% actually of local community was constituted by Jewish population who came to Latvia from Belarus, Poland and Lithuania, and of course they brought with them certain traditions from the countries they come from. And it was around 1800 when the synagogue was raised. And to be more specific, it was built around 1781-82. And we still have some discussions where are the materials from, because the dendrological analysis actually shows that they are from a territory farther away from Ludza municipality. So we have had various discussions. So as I mentioned, it's one of the oldest synagogues in Latvia. And during the Second World War, around 700 wooden synagogues were destroyed in Poland alone. And among them, we had unique masterpieces of architecture, just like which are comparable to the Norwegian stave churches. So, as I mentioned, in Poland, practically all of wooden synagogues were lost. In Lithuania, there are still 13 synagogues remaining, but they are not as old as the one in Latvia. And the only one which dates back to the late 18th century is in Trakai, which actually cannot be regarded as classical synagogue. It rather refers to Knesset, which belonged to Karaim people who resided there since 14th century. And since it was located at the very close to a lake, there was a need to fortify the foundation part. So they removed approximately 1 meter from the ground these wooden structures and actually replaced them with masonry. And from the inside they used plaster. So these wooden synagogues actually were turned into brick synagogues, and it was done around 1920s, 1930s. And it was in 1941 when this territory actually was assigned the status of a Jewish ghetto, and around 1,200 people died in this ghetto, which of course left a huge impact on the community and the area as such. And after the Second World War, after all these horrible killings and at the late years of the World War II and also throughout the Soviet occupation, this building was used for various purposes as a storage room, etc. And only in 1990s, when the Jewish communities tried to restore their traditions and reestablish their community as an integral part of this area, they looked at what could be done, because the damage was already done, extensive damage, mainly due to moisture. This is how it looked in 2011. You can see quite an interesting solution that they used in the roof, which is called which is regarded as the Polish approach. And here you can see the layer of bricks which was made in early 1900s. And here you can also see auxiliary building also here. Here you can see that the synagogue has been included in the municipal plans already since 1700s. And you can see that the lake is quite nearby. This is from 1930s, and here you can see that a new roof has been built. And also the masonry is quite recently built. But already you can see some cracks in the walls, which means that already then this brick masonry wasn't high quality, and it seemed like the structure already suffered from various defects. Here you can see it from a different perspective at late 19th century, already with plastering from the outside. And also it seems like they have built a wooden roof. Here you can see Ludza municipality from a bird's view. This is one of the most beautiful towns in Latvia that boasts a lot of wooden buildings. Here we can see what types of materials were used at that time. And here we can barely notice the influence of the Russian architecture. It seems like the Polish school of architecture still dominates, at least at that particular time. Here we can see 1930s. We already can see the change in the overall architecture, where we have quite strong influences from Russia. And actually the density and the spread of this type of architecture is remarkable, because also when I visited Siberia, in remote villages in Tomsk, and actually it seems like they are copy-paste images of each other. So the geographical spread of this approach actually covered thousands of kilometers, which is quite amazing, and therefore it is our duty to preserve them also here in Latvia. Here we can see a building with a white roof. This is the same synagogue which was re-roofed. It was actually a tin roof put on, and we can still see the original damages incurred during the World War. And in the vicinity of synagogue we can see how the Jewish communities and also other communities lived, traded, and ran their daily errands in Ludza municipality. Here we can see also Orthodox Church, and here you can see 1938, when most of the central part was destroyed by fire. This is the part of city near the lake where some of the buildings actually survived, and most of them were not rebuilt because then the Second World War came, and actually people were not in a position to rebuild the city. And here you can see also how other wooden synagogues looked like in Latgale region. Most of them shared the same characteristics, namely they have the large hall, and the other part consisted of two levels actually. Upper part for women, and the lower was for different facilities. And in the Ludza case, actually, the building was slightly larger, and it also had some auxiliary buildings that actually provided for technical rooms and also other functions necessary for the Jewish community.
So in Daugavpils, again, we see the same type of synagogue, the so-called Rashi type, the Rēzekne and Subet synagogues as well, that belong to a different type. Here we see the Trakai synagogue, and we see the similarity with the Ludza synagogue. So this synagogue is still standing in Lithuania. It is the only remaining wooden synagogue there. I have not been to it myself, but I would like to visit it in person. It is interesting that in the interior, the ceiling and the cupola are almost the same as in Ludza. This is the Pakruojas synagogue in Lithuania that the Lithuanians are planning on reconstructing. Here we have the an interior view of the dome. And so with wooden synagogues, this dates back to pre-Baroque and Baroque period, when these arched and dome-like structures were implemented with very interesting roof structures. And as I already mentioned, in Poland, the synagogue architecture is a fantastical world of its own. There are several books on it. And it is a true pity that many of these synagogues have been destroyed. Here we see the interior of two different synagogues, but I wanted to show this to you so that you can see the grandiose of this culture and of architecture, and the use of this unpainted wood in the 18th century, and the fact that this unpainted wood has remained unchanged until the 1930s and 1940s. This is something very characteristic to synagogues. There have also been, of course, artistically painted interiors. Thanks to coincidence, perhaps these painted domes, which were included in the architectural and cultural heritage of Poland, they were already documented in the 1930s and 40s. And just recently, as a result of an international project, this dome was reconstructed, and it is currently located at the Jewish Museum in Warsaw. And this is one of the means by which Poland is trying to restore its cultural heritage. So here again we see the interesting structure where the whole upper part of the dome and the roof is supported by a very small section of the building. So we see these structures also in the Ludza synagogue. So our engineers were truly fascinated by this, by such a rational and laughably simple structure. This is the greatest evidence left by the Jewish community in Ludza, the cemetery, which is evidence of times gone by. Here we see several views of the synagogue, where we see that it appears to be in good condition. There are no damages visible, seemingly. So on the outside, we can't really see any damages, and the window aisles are also date back to the 20th century, although the composition used is dates back even further. But the overall principles and levels of the building have been kept. However, if we look closely, we see that the seemingly good outer condition is actually not so, because the outside masonry has actually fragmented, and the wooden building within has started to set down and change its shape. Therefore, the outer brick masonry has started cracking. So this approach of creating a outer masonry for a wooden building has not been a good one. Here we see the land where the building is located. However, historically, the lands lying next to the building were also belonged to the Jewish community. However, today they belong to other owners. And here we also see the main entrance. Here we see the inside of the building. Here's the main entrance, the vestibule. On the right we have a teaching hall. Then we have the great prayer hall for men, where we have a rostrum for the leader of ceremonies. And then we have the Torah chest or altar that we would have been on the end of the hall. Then we have various benches and prayer stalls. And then in the learning hall, people would study the scripture. Then on the left, historically, there was the toilet, and it is still located at the same location. Then we have the stairs leading up to the second level, and the prayer hall for women. So in a synagogue, women cannot be anywhere where men can see them, because when the man is praying, he has to speak with God and not think about women. So the plan of the building is a classical one. Some minor changes have taken place. The location of one wall has changed slightly. But if we speak about the roof structure, it is quite difficult to date it, because it has been built so rationally. The whole synagogue has been built so rationally, and sometimes even maintained in a primitive manner, because any external luxury has not been important to them. So the main idea was to have a building for worship. Ludza used to have 7 synagogues, and these were not built by the state or anything. They were built by the communities themselves. At least 8 families were needed to build a synagogue, and so these were constructed for their own funds. Here we see a cross-section of the building, and we can see the quite interesting structure. So here in the attic part, we have 2 beams, and in the middle we have the dome, which is rather light. It doesn't even have any heat insulation. The roof structure on the perimeter creates pressure on this one section. So it's all based on balance to ensure that the walls don't fall out. So there's just one single beam supporting the wall. With the green, you see the structures that we had to change. We didn't change anything on the top of the building. On the deeper foundations remained the same, but we had to change the upper level of the foundations. In order to ensure the livelihood of this building, we had to make sure that it would actually function as well, and that we had to make sure that it had heat insulation and was protected from moisture and various insects. But we also wanted to retain the authenticity of the building. So at a certain point, it became clear to me that the bricks were not a viable option for the building because they would not allow any additional measures or heat insulation to be implemented. And they also affected the load-bearing ability of the building. So the heating loss was up to 45% in the building. So we had to strengthen the basic foundations of the structures of the building. So on the bottom of the building, where we had already changed, where the logs had already been changed twice and replaced with bricks, we now replaced them again with wooden constructions. We used a wooden carcass system, so there was two carcasses, an internal one and an external one, and this was done in order to ensure stability of the building. So we straightened the building by 38 centimeters. It had actually sloped off to one side. There were a couple of centimeters that we were not able to straighten out. So on the upper part, we have the original structure, and we see the external carcass, which was filled with insulation and a board finishing on the outside, which covered the same parts that the bricks had covered previously. The board finishing is something traditional to the Latgale region, and it also allowed for insulation and for the actual survival of the building. Because when we initially removed the bricks and saw the logs underneath, we were quite shocked at the actual condition of the building. Here we see the backside of the building, which is, there is a section of brick to serve as a reminder of what the building looked like for the last 60, 70 years. This section is new because we could not retain the original structure. It had been constructed very primitively, basically just from boards. And the boards were in terrible condition. They had never been painted. And the weather conditions are quite extreme here, so this section of the building was truly dilapidated. The roof structure was retained and the original structures restored. The tin was also retained over various protests. So here again we see the condition of the building, and the interior was plastered in the 1920s and has been plastered with paper several times, and the central part of the dome was decorated with stars. The initial color had been dark blue, together with the stars. Here we see the two mezuzahs, which will be replaced in the building. So these are holy words placed in the building for protection of the building. These are scrolls that can be written only by a certified scripter with special ink on special paper. You can also buy such a scroll in Israel or online to place in your own house. You have to place it above the doorway at a certain height, and we found two of these. Here we see a newspaper that had been plastered on the wall. Here we see sections of the dome. The boards of the dome have been handmade, and the They are wider on one end, shorter on the other, and they were just nailed on. But they were in relatively good condition. What remained of the furniture after World War II, obviously, this is a collection from various homes and sheds. This is another new part which has been constructed relatively recently, so the interior sections also date to different periods, but it is rather difficult to date them precisely. We can see which is newer, which is older, but specific dates eluded us because the condition and workmanship was sometimes truly terrible. In our restoration policy is sometimes the greatest enemy of actual work. So sometimes when we're forced to begin work in the middle of winter, it's truly dramatical. On the interior, we also had to make significant changes. The building was prone to flood, and here, after we removed the outer boards, we see the condition of the logs in the wall, so we see that it was in truly very bad shape. We cleaned the wood on the outside as much as possible, because on the inside there was plaster that we could not take off. So if we had to change all of the sections that had been damaged by termites and other insects and whatnot, we would have to change almost all of the building. So we decided to use various materials to work on this wood, and used biological components, and as well as borax, to get rid of the insect infestation. So we believe that no further problems should persist with the insects, at least. Here we see the upper sections, about 5 or 6 logs on the upper level, which were all right. Here we see what it looked like with the brick finishing. The bricks layer also contained a rubberized layer, so we raised the building up and placed it on blocks. Here we can see it in the picture. And then, little by little, we constructed the lower carcass. We straightened out the upper level of the building. We worked by the principle that we do not have the time and money to disassemble the whole building. We can only conserve it. And the fact that we placed boards on it allowed us to do this, because perhaps people that come after us will be able to implement a more broader reconstruction of the building. Here we also see the phase of building the carcass, the frame. The building was placed on new foundations, as the original ones were coming apart. And then we placed boards on the outer part of the building to ensure airflow. And then we, in this image, see the window aisles. And this is what the new finishing of the building looks like. We have retained the forms of the previous finishing. We have retained bricks in the chimney as well, although the chimney was rebuilt. The outer windows are new, but the inside ones are original. We did not remove the window arches, although, because if we had removed them, the building would simply fall apart. We used also traditional materials in the insulation, which worked perfectly. For a comparison, we see the brick window aisles and the new window aisles. So the form and shape is pretty much the same. And here we see a Kārsava, this example where I realized that there are actually such synagogues elsewhere in Latgale as well. Here we see the new annex with the stairs, and we also see the authentic tin roof with many patches on it. Now about the interior, which you already saw. The interior was originally unpainted. This is traditional in Latgale. Windows, doors, walls, floors were not traditionally painted. Later on, mostly during Soviet times, interiors were painted, not always, but in many occasions. Here we see a part that has fallen off due to water damage, and we see the underlying original finish. Here we see the work in progress. Upon agreement with the Jewish Museum, the local community museum and the local community, we took off all of the plastered paper because it truly looked terrible. For me as an architect, this board structure seemed much more beautiful. However, the idea to retain the paper as a point of authenticity, I can understand it. However, this would have required funding that was not available for the project. So the authentic value of it is also something debatable. I will not go into it now, but this board, the dome, is the only one of its kind in northeastern Europe. So it's a truly debatable issue whether the paper should have been kept. The rest was disassembled. Some of it came down on its own. I will finish shortly.
Here we also can see the work in progress. You can see these decorative stars that were painted with oil paint. They were made of tin with silver coating. Here you can see polychromy that was revealed during the works, and we can see this layer of tiles, and it was restored just partially. This is how it looked in 2013, and what remains of the furniture. And this is how synagogues and in the neighborhood looked throughout Latgale region. This is what we could regard as altar consoles. Here you see petroleum lamps or oil lamps. And this is how the interior now looks, with the refurbished wooden floor. And we also have stainless steel petroleum lamps installed. Here we can see the teaching room before the work started. Here we can see the bricklayers, the masonry up to this part. There were no wooden materials at all. And this is how it looks after the restoration. Of course, we used the new planks, and we tried to find the right pigmentation so that they create the feeling of authenticity. And here you can see actually the authentic ceilings. Also for heating, they had 3 wood stoves. Some original details. Here we can see the women's praying room. After the works were completed, this part of the ceilings actually was replaced somewhere in early 20th century. And we left it as it was. We reused the same planks. So the floor also here is approximately 80 years old, and Latgale is one of the rare regions where they actually use such floors without any type of varnish. Here you can see how the plastering looked like after removing the cement layer. This part actually was painted somewhere in 1930s. All we did was somewhat used some varnish on it in order to make the green color less aggressive, so that it doesn't contrast with this upper part. Here you can see this somewhat transparent varnish that we had used on these parts. And here you can see these decorative stars on the top of the dome. Here we can see the comparison before and after pictures, in other words, because this part of the wall was scrubbed down. We found some original paintings and reconstructed them based on all the knowledge that we had about these polychromy paintings. Here we can see that the oil paint was restored. Here we can see some exposed parts of polychromy, the original part, and here on this side we can see the reconstructed part to keep the composition together. Also before and after picture of the staircase, which was removed, disassembled, restored, and then brought back and installed. Here you can see the vestibule, the entrance. Also here the ceiling planks were replaced. And now you can see the after picture. And here you can also see that the bricks from the facade were used to pave the flooring. In a way, it acts as a heated floor. And here you can see the summary of our reconstruction works in this particular synagogue. So that would be a brief overview. I tried to cover all the aspects. Let me just add that the work that we did, I think it was quite acceptable. Of course, not all are aware how difficult it was and how difficult it was to work with specialists who actually have no experience in restoration works. And if we also have an architect assigned who has no idea about restoration works, then of course no amount of money can make it perfect. A lot of waste. We wasted a lot of resources because of the lack of appropriate specialists, but generally speaking, in other projects, whenever a municipality is in charge of a project, they should be able to attract appropriate specialists. Otherwise, we are wasting our resources, which is a very important aspect of this particular project. So thank you for your attention. Thank you very much for your presentation, and now I will give floor to Per Willy Faergestad, who will talk about the project managing and the learning through cooperation. So I give floor to you.
Hello to everyone, and thank you for invitation. This year it's 10 years since I first visited Kuldīga, and I would like to share my thoughts about the cooperation and what we have learned from it. As we see here, the cooperation at a plane for two men, and you need to work in the same direction. So this is one of the most important things that during our several projects in Kuldīga, that we have involved the town architects, the municipality, the restoration center, the crafters, all kind has been working together, trying to lift these old buildings in Kuldīga to the level that we are at today, and we are working for this every year. Myself, I'm a master craftsman. Had my own company for more than 20 years, working with old houses in Drøbak, Norway. Very similar town to Kuldīga, and for about 2,500 inhabitants, and buildings built almost in the same period. Lots of similarities. Some things are different, but mostly we have similars that we can recognize in Drøbak. I can come here and see the same. That is maybe the influence from German architecture through the time when Kuldīga was part of the Hansa system, and later on the influence from the Germans, and we have the periods with the architecture styles and so on. We can see the same all along the Norwegian coast, from the upper north in Vardø to Drøbak and to Kuldīga. See the same profiles, we see the same dialects in many ways, and we see the same tools, and also a lot of the same use of materials. But very little of this is written down. It's kept for many of them, it's kept only for the crafters. Schools today, very little to read about the practical work. How is the old boards, panels, doors, windows, how were they made, what kind of tools were used, what kind of where in the tree were the materials taken out for the best place in the house, what was the best use for material in windows, indoors, floors for roofing, and so on. Very little is written about this, and we see that the crafters could be the most important source. As Sjur told us, the crafters at the stave churches are very important for watching with the eyes and the hands the patterns from tools and so on. So during our project, I feel that we have been possible to lift the craftsmen up, so the municipality and town architects and the society around, and even also the Latvia as a country, can see that the crafters have big value in this process. This is the first project we had in 2008, where we started up a cooperation with education of crafters. We started up in Drøbak and with a workshop, with 4 or 5 days, and 2 weeks later we were in Kuldiga. We had a door up left, which was very destroyed. We had to take it apart and look at the inside of the door. There's a lot of books. You can see photos, drawings of how the door looked like from outside, styles, period, and so on. But the inside, how is the connection? What kind of tools is used? Is it door for the planes, the wood turning? Is it wood carving? A lot of crafters is involved in many of these doors, and we need skilled crafters to make this restoration work, and we need the right tools and the materials, of course. So we took the door apart, and we had the mayor visited us and was a little bit shocked, I think, when the door was taken apart. He thought we should restore it and be careful, but this was the only way we could do, and we also made it a little bit we took it apart and look at every kind of connection for this. Like here, make the drawing of the construction, and we saw and showed different way to do this reparation of these rotten parts and broken parts. And Kuldiga, as I heard and read about, is quite well known in Latvia as a well-kept wooden town. Lots of old wooden houses from 1670 and lots of them up to 1900. Many of them from the road. You can see it's plastered on the facade, but it's just a centimeter with plaster outside the wooden construction, the log construction. And when we started visited Kuldiga first time in 2006 together with Norwegian Craft Institute. This was the partner in our first project. It had a duration for 2 years. The town was quite tired, unpainted. It was asking for help in a way. The houses were, the facades were grey, very little paint and so on. And we started up with a restoration center, and all around the town now we can find doors coming up. As you see here, Kuldigas Dambis is Kuldigas doors is like flowers, because when you in the winter time and so on, you go along a grey facade and then suddenly, a red door, a yellow door coming up, and a door from different periods, 150 years old, 200 years old. Fantastic craftsmen have done this. Lots of decoration, profiles, moldings. And these are today mostly done by the Restoration Center and the craftsmen there. And I think that they also do all the drawings, they make designs for rotten parts, what is necessary to change. So they have the plans, and they cooperate very well with the town architects and so on. So you see this, and we also had a discussion about with the municipality, why could we just change the doors? They are old and they wouldn't shut very good and all this. So we said that if you want to have tourists, you can't have tourists here for copies. It must be a true town that you can see. Oh, this door is 200 years old. This is so and so. You must have the history. If you don't have the history, the interest site for the tourist will fall. So I think the Kuldøya had done a very good job compared to take care of the doors and the facades. And now several buildings, since I came there, we started up from 2008, several buildings got a new facade and painted in the old colors. They have had a big project where lots of houses, most of them in the central protected area, they have looked for the old colors of the facades and windows and so on through 150 years. Yeah, you see here also the same door with 5 years between. And the old doors, which is a kind of a book for wisdom. How is the construction? What is inside? We can see just the outside here, but what is inside? What kind of materials is used? So I would have a dream to make a copy of the brown or the door in Kalnajala 15. That should be a very nice project for a coming workshop. Yeah, details, we can see how the materials is taken out. This is a door, I think it must be 250, maybe 300 years old, at the museum, in an exhibition right now. And when we're working with the craftsmen, and we feel that they manage to do the right things, we get this proud man. He start believing in himself that I can fix this. I know how they do. I know what kind of tools, materials. This is the kind of education that you can't get in schools today. It's very hard to get this. We haven't. The schools is very standard. It's for the new regulations, new laws, but in the modern building industry. But very little is to learn in a normal school for the old way of doing. So in Norway now, we have started up the second year now. We have a kind of education for 1 year, but we want to be for 2 years in restoration work. And this is also from Kuldøya, the window shutters. And as we see here, you see the boards are quite, they're used very economical. You see the bottom of the tree is on the top, and the top is on the bottom. You see it's like a wedge. So they use it, they don't throw away so much materials. And if you look at the newer shutters, they're made of small boards. And you see they move more because they're taken out of the tree in a different way from the old ones. But there could be 2 boards instead of 5 or 6. And several of these is 150 years, maybe some of them are 200 years old. And they are very nice to see and to learn about these constructions. As we see here, to take apart things, and we had this connection we found in one of the other, in another shutters in Kuldøya. So we copied that way of make new canals. This was broken, so we made new ones down here, and also put up the new bottom parts here. And in the beginning, we were not allowed to. The craftsman from Kulja was not allowed to do work in Norway. But we made a plan, so we had a project and a workshop in August. So we made planes for Kulja in June. So then we we used the plane in August then for our project. So we were very find this way. But now it has changed a little bit, so they can now work also with special works in jobs in Drøbak. All tools.
Darba rīki. Par visi šie ir amatniekiem jāmāk izmantot. Mēs mūsu apmācībās arī par tiem runājām. Tad cirvis ir gandrīz tā paša profila.
All doors and so on, we can see that the old tools is very easily to use when making restoration works. Several of these tools here are common, and we find them in Norway, find them here in Kulja, and it's used in the same way, in the same period. This was a standard equipment for a carpenter. We have had several workshops in Kulja and Drøbak. We are inviting each other, so 5 to 8 crafters visiting every time. So the upper photos is from 2 years ago in Drøbak. We were 23 crafters making boards for a house for about 1750. We had started up in February with cutting trees, and in April we cut the boards on a bandsaw, and then in September we made all the planing and all the systems for as we call it, from the forest to the wall. It was the normal job for the craftsman was to make the board. Not like today when you just go to a shop and buy the board finished, and the craftsman's work is to just hammer it on the wall and then finishing. You had to make it with profiles and everything. So this is a very important process for all kind of education. If you're a painter or carpenter or tinsmith, you need to see these old ways to do it and use these materials to understand the process. It's very important. And then you can, of course, take some shortcuts when people don't see you. And then you can, because we have some prices, some for the jobs and so on, and to be effective. But we often see that all tools could be the most effective in many of these jobs. Absolutely. And what we also learn is important to learn the craftsman. Norway, Kulja, Latvia, somewhere. It is to use the eyes. What do we see here? What kind of tools? What kind of materials? What do we see here? You want to copy something. It must be something, some signals that the building can give you. And to know about the signals, you need to know how the tools work, know the plane, know the kind of, is it cut by a watermill saw up and down? Is it by hand saw? Is it by axe? What kind of tools is done to use this? So if we see on this one, you can see stripes up here from the plane. And this is the back side. We can see the same. Because when the carpenter got this to the building, it was just cotton and very rough surface. And his job was to make it smooth by planing, as we saw at the first picture. The two men were planing them smooth, so it could be used for the ceiling as here. But on the back side, very often you can see the cutting from the saw, because it was necessary to do. It didn't as much as was necessary. Very often we can see that. And that is also patterns that can say, how old is it? Because the circle saw came about 1860 and more popular for this, and the machine planing also come about this period with the industrial revolution and machinery and steam engines and so on. So this is also, and nails, what kind of nails? Is it made by hand, by a blacksmith, or is it made in a factory? This is also a sign that we try to learn the crafters so they can be very skilled, go into a building and quite read the building very easily. Yes, and as I started up with, very often we see craftsmen working two and two together. And after the workshops, they have got some extra impulses, they have got some extra knowledge, so they can safely work alone and think that I can fix this. I understand which side of the board I should use. I know which tool I need. Maybe I need to make a new tool, a new plane for this job, or I can borrow it. But during a workshop, every time the crafters is on this workshop, they will be lifted a little level higher for every time. And for the town of Kuldiga, I think it's the best investment I could do, that to educate crafters, and that will be important for all over Latvia, of course, and for not only for wood but also for brick, for plaster, for paint, for tinsmiths, and everything to housing and so on. So that's it. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Mr. Per Willy. We have almost been able to stick to the schedule perfectly. Unfortunately, we have no more time for questions and answers, but I think that everyone will be happy to have a little walk in the fresh air. We shall go to the Pēteris Blūms restaurant, where we will have lunch, and hopefully at 1:30 we meet back here again. And our Norwegian colleagues will be accompanied by an administration